I want you to do something for me right now before we get into anything. I want you to finish this sentence in your head. Um, uh, Go on and say it. What came to mind first? For most of you watching this particular video, the first word that came to mind was your profession. I'm a doctor, I'm a pharmacist, I'm a nurse, I'm a medical student. And that answer makes complete sense. You have spent years, number of years, the most formative years of your adult life, pouring everything into becoming that thing. Of course, it's the first thing you reach for. But here's the question I actually want to sit with today. What happens when that thing is taken away from you, even temporarily? What happens to your sense of self when the system makes you wait, when there's no word to report to, no patients to see, no title you can actively use, no role that confirms who you are? Who are you then? Who do you become then when that happens? That question is not abstract. For thousands of medical graduates across this country right now, that question is their daily reality. And nobody, not a single lecturer, not a single supervisor prepared them for it. That's what we are talking about today. Now, welcome back to After Campus series. I'm Dr. Libea Bethel. I'm a pharmacist and I'll be taking you through this particular series. So if you are just joining us, this is a 20 episode series that is built specifically for medical students, pre-interns, and early career health professionals. We cover everything that medical school never taught you about building a career. Yesterday, in episode 1, we talked about the gap between what your training prepared you for and what the real world is actually asking of you. Today, we go deeper because before we talk about CVs and networks and opportunities, we need to talk about something more fundamental. We need to talk about who you are, not what you studied, not what your title is, not what the system has certified you to do. Who you are, that is fundamental because if you don't have clarity on that, every career decision you make from here will be built on an unstable foundation. Now, let's get into it. Now, I want to tell you about someone. Let's call him Daniel. Now, Daniel was the kind of student that every lecturer remembers, not necessarily because he was the loudest in the room, but because he was consistent in what he does. He was dependable, always prepared. He took his training seriously in a way that most people around him admired. And when he finally graduated, that is after 6 years of everything that medical school demands, his family threw a celebration that the whole extended family attended. His mother cried, of course. His father shook his hand and said, "You've made us proud." And in that moment, Daniel felt it, that sense of arrival. I did it. I'm a doctor now. I made it. But 3 months later, something else began happening. Daniel was sitting in his childhood bedroom. There's no internship posting yet, no structure to his day, no patience to see. And he told me something that has stayed with me since. He said, "I don't know who I am when I'm not being a medical student. And that's the only version of myself I've known for 6 good years. And now that it's over, I feel like I lost something, like a part of me is just missing." That feeling Daniel described has a name. Psychologists call it identity foreclosure. It's what happens when a person builds their entire sense of self around one role, one title, one pursuit. And it is incredibly common in medicine. In fact, I would argue it is almost inevitable given how all consuming medical training is. But here's the problem. When that role is disrupted, even temporarily. The person doesn't just feel lost professionally, they feel lost personally. And that is a very heavy place to be. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. Medical training, by design, asks you to sacrifice a lot. And I mean that literally. Think about what the last few years have looked like. Think about it. The social events you skip because of exams, the hobbies you quietly drop because there wasn't time, the relationships that took a backseat to rotations and night calls, the version of yourself that used to paint or play football or write or cook, that version slowly got quieter and quieter because medical school got louder and louder. And you told yourself reasonably, I'll get back to that later. Now, once I finish this, once I get through this rotation, once I graduate, that is what you told yourself. But here is what nobody tells you that I want to tell you. By the time you graduate, that later version of yourself has become a stranger. You've spent so long being the medical student that you have almost forgotten what else you are. And this is not your fault. It is not your fault at all. The system rewards this actually. Now, medical culture celebrates total dedication. It does. The student who studies through weekends is admired. The intern who stays late without being asked is praised. The professional who has no life outside the hospital is someone respected or somehow respected. And so, without even realizing it, you learn to measure your worth by your clinical output, by your grades, by your performance, and by how well you fit the mold of a doctor. And that works for a while until the day when the clinical output stops and the grades no longer matter. And then performance has no audience. And you're left sitting in a room with just yourself, wondering who that person actually is. And in my conversations with young health professionals, and I've had many across forums, in clinics, in private messages, I've noticed that people tend to fall into one of three patterns when it comes to identity. Let me walk you through them, and I want you to honestly ask yourself which one sounds most like you. Now, this is the first one is the person whose identity and profession are completely fused. Everything about how they see themselves runs through their medical lens. They introduce themselves by their title, even in casual settings. Their social media is almost entirely about their career. Their sense of a good day or a bad day is entirely determined by how the clinical work went. They are not performing. They genuinely believe they are the profession, and they are often the highest achievers. But they are also most fragile because when the system disrupts them, a bad result, a delayed posting, a failure, they don't just feel professionally challenged, they feel personally destroyed because they have no separate sense of self to fall back on. The second category, this is a person who has interest and dimensions beyond medicine but feels guilty about them. They love photography or creative writing, or they're genuinely passionate about business. But somewhere along the way, they absorbed the message that those things are distractions, that a real medical professional is fully committed, that having interests outside of the hospital means you are not serious enough. So they keep those parts of themselves quiet. They keep them hidden, maybe even apologizing for them. I know I should be studying, but I've been writing. I know it sounds weird for a doctor, but I really love. That apology at the beginning of the sentence, that is the quietly conflicted. They are whole people pretending to be one dimensional ones. Now, the third is the beginning to ask, the one who begins to ask. This is the person who has started to sense that something is off. they have graduated or they are close to graduating and they are starting to notice a quiet discomfort, a feeling that the career they are walking into doesn't fully fit, not because they chose the wrong field, but because they've never actually stopped to ask what they want from it. They are not lost, they are not falling, they are just waking up to a question that medical school never gave them permission to ask. What kind of life do I actually want to build? What kind of life do I actually want to build? Now, which one of these are you? Be honest with yourself, because knowing which pattern you are in is the first step to changing it. I want to make sure this doesn't feel like a philosophical conversation with no real world consequences. I want to make sure that that happens, because the truth is, this identity question has very practical implications for your career. Let me give you three of them. First, it affects how you handle setbacks. The internship period, that 12-month gap between graduation and internship, that 12-month gap is one of the most identity threatening periods in a medical professional's life, because suddenly the thing that defined you is on pause. And if your entire identity is built around being a clinician, that pause doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels like an erasure. And from that place, people make poor decisions. They take any posting just to feel active again. They say yes to things that doesn't or don't serve them just to feel like they are moving, or they sink into anxiety and inertia because they don't know who they are without the role. But the person who has a strong multidimensional sense of self, they experience the same waiting period very differently, because they know they are more than the posting. The post doesn't define them. Second, it affects what opportunities you can even see. Now, when you are fully merged with one professional identity, you develop tunnel vision, what we call a tunnel vision. You can only see the path that your training laid out. That is clinical work, specialist training, more clinical work. And you completely miss the extraordinary range of other things your qualification can open for you. Talk about the global health, research, pharma, policy, health technology, education, entrepreneurship. No, these are not alternatives to medicine. They are extensions of medicine. But you can only see them if you are not standing so close to one definition of yourself that everything else is out of focus. Thirdly, it affects the quality of care you eventually give. And this one is very important. The research on healthcare professional well-being is very clear on this. Clinicians who have rich lives outside of their profession, who have relationships, interests, rest, perspective, are better clinicians. They have more empathy, more patience, more resilience. They don't burn out as quickly. They last longer, and they actually enjoy the work. They enjoy the work that they do, and they work more. The idea that total sacrifice makes you a better doctor is not just wrong, it is dangerous. That idea is dangerous. So let's talk about what to do with all of this, because I promised you at the start of this series, this is not a motivational series. So every episode ends with something real, something actionable. So here are three things I want you to do before I share episode 3 or the next episode. First, write your answer to this particular question. Not in your head, actually write it down. Who am I outside of my profession? Who am I outside of my profession? Not your grades, not your achievements, not your title. What do you enjoy? What makes you lose track of time? What will you do on a completely free Saturday that had nothing to do with medicine? What are you curious? What are you curious, or what are things that pique your curiosity and has nothing to do with your course? Write it down. even if the answer feels small or embarrassing or like it doesn't belong next to your degree, because those things belong to you and they're part of who you are. Secondly, identify one thing you gave up for medical school. Could be a hobby, an interest, a part of yourself, something you used to love that got quieter over the years of training, and make a decision to revisit it, not to master it, not to monetize it, just to reconnect with that part of yourself, because that part of you is still there. It just went quiet and it needs you to come back for it. Third, change how you introduce yourself. The next time someone asks you, tell me about yourself, don't lead with your title. Don't. Try this instead. Instead of leading with your title, try this. Lead with something you care about, something you're building, something you're curious about. Let the degree be one part of a bigger, richer answer, because that is closer to the truth of who you are. And it is far more interesting to the people you'll be meeting as you build your career. To be far more interesting to the people you'll be meeting as you build your career. Before I close today, I want to say something that I think needs to be said out loud. Somewhere in your training, you are taught, directly or indirectly, that wanting things for yourself is somehow at odds with serving others. That wanting things for yourself is somehow at odds with serving others. That a good doctor is selfless doctor. That ambition is okay as long as it's clinical ambition. That who you are outside the hospital is secondary to who you are inside. And I want to gently push back on that. I want to gently push back on that. You did not spend 6 years sacrificing everything to arrive at a career where you're expected to continue sacrificing everything. You're allowed to want a life. You're allowed to do that. A full one, in fact, with interest, with rest, with relationships, with joy, ambition, that goes in multiple directions. That doesn't make you a less committed professional. It makes you a more sustainable one. And the world, especially this continent, needs you sustainable. It needs you in this field for 30, 40 years, not burning out in 5. So please, give yourself permission to be a whole person, because that is not the opposite of being a great medical professional. It is not. That is the foundation of it. It is the foundation of being a great medical profession. Now, that is episode 2 of our After Campus series. Before you go, 2 things. First, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, outside of medicine, who are you? One thing, just one, in the comment section. It can be small, it can be unexpected. I'll be in the comments reading every single one of them. And secondly, tomorrow's episode, or the next episode, is one I think you're going to find very confronting. In the best way, of course, not in the bad way. We are going to talk about how to figure out what kind of career you actually want. I'm going to introduce a framework that will help you see the full spectrum of where your qualification can take you. Is it clinical, non-clinical? Is it a hybrid of both? And more importantly, how to figure out which one actually fits you. You do not want to miss it. You don't want to miss the next episode. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, I'm Libya Bethwell. I'll be taking you through this particular series. This is After Campus series. See you.